In 1227, a man who had conquered more territory than any human being in history lay dying in a felt tent on the Mongolian steppes, his empire stretching from Korea to the gates of Vienna, larger than the Roman Empire at its peak. Yet this same man had once been a homeless child, abandoned by his own tribe, forced to eat grass seeds and hunt mice just to survive another winter. This is the story of how Temüjin, a powerless orphan, became Genghis Khan and created the largest contiguous land empire the world has ever known. Around 1162, in the windswept grasslands near the Onan River, a child entered the world clutching a blood clot in his tiny fist. An omen that Mongol shamans declared meant he was destined to spill the blood of his enemies. His father, Yesugei, chieftain of the Borjigin clan, named him Temüjin after a Tatar warrior he had recently captured in battle. But this noble birth would prove meaningless in a world where survival depended entirely on the strength of your sword arm and the loyalty of your followers. The Mongolia of Temüjin's childhood was a brutal landscape where dozens of nomadic tribes waged endless war against each other, fighting over grazing rights, stolen horses, and blood feuds that stretched back generations. The Tatars, Merkits, Naimans, and Taichuds lived in constant conflict, and in this savage world, weakness meant death and mercy was a luxury that few could afford. When Temüjin was just 9 years old, disaster struck with devastating swiftness. His father, Yesugei, was returning from arranging his son's future marriage when he stopped at a Tatar camp to share a meal, a sacred gesture of hospitality among the steppe tribes. But the Tatars recognized Yesugei as the man who had killed their kinsman, and they secretly poisoned his food, condemning him to an agonizing death that would shatter his family's world forever. As Yesugei lay dying, writhing in agony from the poison coursing through his veins, he managed to send word to his clan, gasping out desperate instructions for Temüjin to return home immediately. But when the boy arrived, it was already too late. His father was dead, and in the brutal calculus of nomadic politics, the Borjigin elders declared they would no longer follow a mere child. Within days, Temüjin watched helplessly as his father's followers abandoned his mother, Hörlün, and her 7 children, leaving them to face the approaching Mongol winter without protection, without livestock, and without hope. What followed were years of desperate poverty that would have destroyed a weaker spirit, but instead transformed Temüjin into something harder and more ruthless than the steppes had ever produced. Hörlün, a woman of extraordinary courage, kept her family alive through sheer determination, teaching her children to dig for wild roots with their bare hands, catch fish in frozen streams, and hunt field mice and marmots with makeshift weapons. The family lived like outcasts, constantly moving to avoid the territories of stronger tribes who might kill them simply for trespassing on their grazing lands. Temüjin learned to sleep with one eye open, to trust no one completely, and to understand that in this world, only the strong survived, while the weak became slaves or corpses scattered on the endless grass. The defining moment of Temüjin's brutal education came during a dispute with his half-brother Bektir over a fish they had caught together. When Bektir claimed the larger portion by right of age, something cold and terrible awakened inside the teenage Temüjin. He and his full brother Kasar stalked Bektir across the steppes like hunting wolves, and when they found him sitting alone on a hillside, they shot him down with arrows without warning or mercy. As Bektir lay bleeding into the earth, he looked up at his killer and gasped, "Now you have no companion but your shadow." His mother Hörlün was horrified by this act of fratricide, calling Temüjin a destroyer who would devour even his own family. But the boy felt no remorse. He had learned that in this world, even brothers could become enemies, and that mercy was a weakness that orphans could never afford. When the Taichud tribe captured 16-year-old Temüjin and imprisoned him in a wooden collar called a kangwei, planning to keep him as a slave for life, he waited patiently for his chance. During a festival when his captors were drunk on fermented mare's milk, Temüjin struck down his guard with the heavy wooden collar and escaped into the night, hiding submerged in a river while search parties thundered overhead with torches blazing. By his early 20s, Temüjin had begun the long, bloody process of rebuilding his father's shattered clan, using a combination of military genius, political cunning, and an almost supernatural ability to inspire fierce loyalty among warriors who had been abandoned by every other leader on the steppes. His first major alliance was with Togrul, the powerful Khan of the Karaite tribe, who had once sworn brotherhood with Yesugei and agreed to support his old friend's son. When Merkit's raiders kidnapped Temüjin's wife Berte in revenge for ancient grievances, His own father had once stolen Hurlin from the Merkits in exactly the same way. The young warrior assembled a coalition of allies and launched a devastating night attack that rescued his bride and established his reputation as a leader who would stop at nothing to protect his people. But the most complex and ultimately tragic relationship of Temujin's rise was with Jamuka, his childhood friend who had become his sworn blood brother through the ancient Mongol ritual of Anda. For years, the two young leaders shared power and fought side by side, but their fundamentally different visions for the future of Mongolia would eventually tear them apart in the most bitter way possible. Jamuka represented the old aristocratic order, where power belonged by birthright to those of noble blood and traditional clan structures, remained sacred and unchangeable. Temüjin, shaped by years of poverty and abandonment, promoted a revolutionary meritocracy where any warrior could rise through courage and ability regardless of his ancestry, and where loyalty to the leader mattered more than ancient tribal affiliations. When Yamuka's followers began defecting to Temujin's more egalitarian banner, the former blood brothers declared war on each other in a conflict that would determine whether Mongolia remained trapped in its cycle of tribal warfare or united under a single powerful ruler. The war between Temujin and Jamuka raged across the steppes for over a decade, a vicious struggle between the past and the future that left thousands of warriors dead on the grass and transformed the survivors into the most disciplined fighting force the world had ever seen. Temujin suffered crushing defeats, including the horrific Battle of Dalan Baljut, where Jamuka captured 13 of his most trusted commanders and had them boiled alive in great iron cauldrons as a warning to anyone who dared oppose the traditional order. But with each setback, Temujin learned invaluable lessons about warfare, leadership, and the psychology of power that would make him nearly unstoppable in the years to come. He revolutionized steppe warfare by organizing his army into decimal units of 10, 100, 1,000, and 10,000 warriors, with promotion based entirely on merit rather than birth or tribal connections. He forbade the looting of enemies until victory was complete, ensuring that his troops remained focused and disciplined even in the heat of battle, and he established a code of absolute loyalty that bound his followers to him with chains stronger than blood or tradition. By 1205, after 20 years of relentless warfare, Temujin had systematically defeated every rival claimant to supreme power over Mongolia. Jamuka, betrayed by his own aristocratic followers who had grown weary of endless defeat, was finally captured and brought before his former blood brother in chains. In their last meeting, Jamuka acknowledged Temujin's superiority with bitter grace, saying, "The world has come to you, and what more is there to be said?" When Temujin offered to spare his life and restore their ancient friendship, Jamuka refused, asking instead for an honorable death befitting a prince of the steppes. Temujin granted this final request, ordering that his former Anda be executed without spilling blood, broken bones rather than blade wounds, as was proper for Mongol royalty. In the spring of 1206, representatives from every Mongol tribe gathered for an unprecedented Kurultai, a great assembly, on the banks of the Onon River where Temujin had been born 44 years earlier. Nearly 1 million Mongols witnessed his elevation to the title of Genghis Khan, meaning universal ruler, acknowledging him as the supreme leader of all the peoples of the felt-walled tents. The newly proclaimed Genghis Khan immediately began implementing revolutionary changes that would transform not just Mongol society, but the entire world. He established the Yasa, a comprehensive legal code that emphasized loyalty, discipline, and merit over birth, while mandating complete religious tolerance and protection for merchants, craftsmen, and scholars regardless of their origins. Under the Yasa, the theft of livestock became punishable by death, while religious leaders of all faiths were exempted from taxation and military service. Women received unprecedented legal protection, including rights to property ownership and divorce, making the Mongol Empire remarkably progressive compared to the rigid feudal societies of Europe and Asia. Most importantly, Genghis Khan abolished the ancient tribal divisions that had kept the Mongols weak and fractured, redistributing defeated enemies among his loyal followers to break up traditional power structures and create a new unified nation based on personal loyalty rather than blood connections. With Mongolia finally united under his iron discipline, Genghis Khan turned his attention to the wealthy civilizations that surrounded his steppe empire. beginning with the Western Xia Kingdom that controlled crucial trade routes along the Silk Road between China and Central Asia. The siege warfare that followed revealed the true terrifying genius of Mongol military innovation. The nomadic warriors, who had never needed catapults or siege towers on the open steppes, quickly learned to capture and employ Chinese engineers, adopting advanced siege technology and combining it with their traditional mobility to create armies that could strike anywhere with devastating speed and power. When Western Xia submitted in 1209, Genghis Khan demonstrated the mercy he would show to those who surrendered willingly. The Tangut rulers kept their thrones as vassals while their kingdom's resources and expertise were integrated into the growing Mongol war machine. His next target was infinitely more challenging. The Jin dynasty, which ruled northern China from their heavily fortified capital at Zhongdu, modern-day Beijing. The Jin possessed sophisticated military technology, massive armies numbering in the hundreds of thousands, and defensive walls that had protected Chinese civilization for centuries, but they had never faced an enemy like Genghis Khan. The Mongol invasion of Jin territory beginning in 1211 introduced a completely new form of warfare to the world. Lightning-fast cavalry armies struck simultaneously across a front stretching over 1,000 miles, appearing suddenly to devastate entire provinces before vanishing back into the steppes like deadly phantoms. Chinese chronicles described the Mongol horsemen as demons who flew like the wind and struck like thunder, capable of covering impossible distances in days rather than weeks, and coordinating their attacks with a precision that seemed almost supernatural to their bewildered enemies. After years of relentless campaigns that left northern China in ruins, Beijing finally fell to the Mongols in 1215, its destruction so complete that visitors reported mountains of human bones stretching to the horizon, and ground so soaked with blood and fat that it remained slippery for years afterward. But Genghis Khan might have stopped there, content to consolidate his Chinese conquests, if not for a single act of breathtaking arrogance by the Khwarezmian Empire that would unleash the full fury of the Mongol war machine upon the Islamic world and change the course of human history forever. In 1218, when Genghis Khan sent a peaceful trade caravan of 500 merchants to establish commercial relations with the wealthy cities of Central Asia, Inalchuk, the governor of Otrar, accused the traders of being spies and had them all executed, seizing their valuable goods for himself. When Genghis Khan dispatched envoys demanding justice and compensation, the Khwarezm Shah Muhammad II compounded this insult by having the ambassadors murdered and sending back only their severed heads as his answer. This was perhaps the greatest diplomatic blunder in human history, transforming Genghis Khan from a pragmatic conqueror seeking trade and tribute into an avenging angel determined to erase the Khwarezmian Empire from existence. The invasion that began in 1219 was unlike anything the Islamic world had ever experienced or imagined possible. Genghis Khan personally led an army of 150,000 veterans across the steppes, while additional forces under his greatest generals struck from multiple directions, coordinating their movements across thousands of miles with mathematical precision. The great cities of Central Asia fell one by one in scenes of unprecedented destruction. Bukhara, the jewel of Islamic learning, saw its libraries burned and scholars massacred. Samarkand, the crossroads of the Silk Road, was so thoroughly destroyed that grass grew in its streets for decades. The city of Urgench was not merely captured, but literally erased. The Mongols diverted an entire river to wash away its ruins, ensuring nothing would ever grow there again. By 1227, Genghis Khan's empire stretched from Korea in the east to the Caspian Sea in the west, encompassing territories that would not be matched in size until the age of modern nation-states. But the great conqueror was now 65 years old, and the endless campaigns were finally taking their toll on even his iron constitution. During what would prove to be his final military campaign against the Western Xia Kingdom, which had dared to rebel against Mongol authority, Genghis Khan fell seriously ill. The exact cause remains one of history's mysteries, whether from injuries sustained in a hunting accident, disease, or perhaps poison administered by a captured enemy princess. But by August 1227, the universal ruler knew his time was ending. According to Mongol tradition recorded in the secret history, Genghis Khan's final words were instructions for the complete destruction of the Western Xia people, and a reminder to his sons that the empire's survival depended on their unity. With heaven's aid, I have conquered for you a huge empire. But my life was too short to achieve the conquest of the world. That I leave to you. The secrecy surrounding his death and burial was absolute. His body was transported back to Mongolia in complete silence, with every person encountered along the funeral route killed to prevent them from revealing the location of his tomb. The 1,000 soldiers who carried out the burial were themselves executed by another group, who were then killed by yet another group, ensuring that the resting place of the Great Khan would remain hidden forever. Before his death, Genghis Khan had reportedly expressed his wish: "Let me be buried without ceremony, without pomp, and without a monument. Let me return to the earth as simply as I came from it." True to his request, he was laid to rest somewhere in the sacred Kanti Mountains, likely near Burkhan Khaldun, the peak he had declared holy during his youth when it provided shelter from his enemies. To this day, the location remains one of archaeology's greatest mysteries, with the area around Burkhan Khaldun still forbidden to excavation out of respect for Mongol beliefs that disturbing the tomb would bring catastrophe upon the world. 800 years after his death, Genghis Khan's legacy continues to reshape our understanding of human potential and the power of absolute determination. Scientific studies suggest that approximately 16 million men alive today carry genetic markers linked to Genghis Khan and his close relatives, making him one of the most successful biological ancestors in human history. The homeless child who had once been abandoned by his own people became immortal, proving that sometimes those who begin with nothing possess the most powerful reasons to conquer everything, and that in the right circumstances, one extraordinary individual can indeed change the course of human history forever.